I'm going to be talking about international trade, which I think it's very important to know what international trade law is. As consumers, we do deal with this with our everyday day life, and we might not know it because we don't think about like, oh, where is this product coming from? But we do deal with it since everything that we buy comes from out of the United States. So I think that's why it is very important. So I'm going to give you a little introduction. I'm going to give you the definition of international trade law, a little bit of history, the definition of international business entity, the types of law, methods, problems, contracts, relations, and how international trade, how it affects the U.S., and what are some of its regulations. So, definition of international law is the body of rules, regulations, treaties, and conventions that govern the relationship between nations. There is also private international law, which is the process of unification of law among nations, as well as formation of substantive rules that affect private parties. And also there's international business entity, which they call it IBE. It's any business entity with relationship that transcend national boundaries. So a little bit of history. International trade began in the 18th century and it started in Europe, and it was based on theories of economic liberalism. The trade began between Romans and Indians. Silk and spices were the main products. Now in the 21st century, we can see that China, European Union, and the United States are the three largest trading markets there are here in the world. So I'm going to start with international business entity. It's what they call IBE, and it regulates at different levels. It's home country regulations, host country regulations, regional regulations, and international regulations. So home country regulations is laws of the countries where IBE has its principal place of business or it's incorporated. Host is legal systems of laws of foreign jurisdiction. Regional, laws of groups of nations that have bonded together for a particular purpose. International, public international law, which includes codes of conduct like conventions on international sales of goods. So IBE has a direct impact on international law, and it keeps growing day by day, so that's why it is very important on international business law. So there's types of laws, and it's international law is a law of consent. International is only binding on those who agree to be bound, so it doesn't affect you if you are not gonna be if you're not gonna be binding. Private international law are issues between nations, but they can also affect individuals. Some think that that international law doesn't have no power because there is no police force on it, no army force on it. It is only effective in areas where one nation is required to impair its vital interests. So it's only if you are, like I said, if you agree to be bound, then that's how it's gonna affect. So there are 5 ways of international business, which is information, import, exports, distributorships, licensing, and direct investment. So information is the purpose. The purpose is to distribute pamphlets, brochures, timetables, or any questions or concerns that any customer might have. That's why they use information. Import exports are just the transactions that are subject to import regulations and quotas, customer duties, and export controls. It's also subject to laws governing product liability, both home and host countries. We have distributorships, which is relationships that involve the sale of goods to an individual or sales organization that in turn resells the product in a foreign country. Licensing is based on contract allowing a foreign individual, firm, or country to use the IBE's intellectual properties. Last, we have direct investments, which is portfolio, branch, subsidiary, and joint venture. So portfolio is the investment of money. A branch is an arm of the IBE. Subsidiary is separate from the IBE. And joint venture is partnerships between corporations. Problems. There might be any disputes between countries when a trade is made. So the problems is that you don't know which law, which regulation from which country is going to be applied. So that's why we have the choice of law and the conflict of law. So the choice of law is the parties to a contract can specify in the contract that the law of a particular country will apply to dispute arising from the contract. So they are contracts. That way you know which side it will be to. And then there's conflict of laws, which is courts will apply its own principle in deciding which law to follow. Contracts. So we have international business has its contracts, which includes choice of language, term of payment, force majeure, government approval, arbitration clause, choice of forum, choice of law. So we have the choice of language. So meaning what language you are going to be making the transaction in, what language you're going to talk to, and what language the contract is going to be written. Then we have the term of payment, which is what currency is going to be used and the location of the payment, and just to make sure that the currency can be taken back to your country. Then we have force majeure, which is superior power, which is they call it the act of God, which is natural disasters. There's floods, earthquakes, and there's wars, riots. It's the type of clause excuse non-performance under specific circumstances. Next, we have government approval, which is who is responsible for getting permits, licenses, all the contracts, and to keep on going with the trade. Then we have arbitration, which arbitration rule would apply and where it would take place to resolve a dispute before a lawsuit. Next, we have choice of forum, which are parties to an international contract have some flexibility where a lawsuit will be brought in a case of contract dispute. Last, we have choice of law, which the parties to an international contract can also designate a particular country. Law will apply to any disputes arising out of the contract. So those are the type of contracts there are. Next, we have regulations. So there's international controls and host regulations. International control does apply to the CISG and the WTO. CISG is Convention of International Sale of Goods, which is the type of international uniform commercial code. Applies to a transaction between two countries but doesn't apply to the sale of goods to consumers. Then we have WTO, which is World Trade Organization, which seeks to reduce or eliminate trade barriers. Next is host regulations. So it's condition entry, sets conditions before doing business. Controls over capital movements, what currency can be brought and taken out of the country. We have tax legislations, tax holidays, tax credits, tax rates, and those can be very favorable actually. And then we have control through disclosure, which is kind of employment, what people you're going to hire, how much you're going to pay, where they're going to be located. So those are the regulations. Last, I have international trade in the U.S., what kind of laws we have and how it affects the imports and exports. So we have the import-export, antitrust laws, and anti-boycott laws. So the imports, we're gonna start with the imports, and they are called dumping, and those are when foreign goods are priced extremely low with the purpose of capturing large market share. And the Department of Commerce does make a determination whether goods are sold at a fair market value, and they do that so there is no injury to the U.S. So that's how they regulated. Um, Next, we have the exports. So basically, nothing goes out without the government permission, and you have to, if you want to export, you gotta have a license, which there are two types. It's the general license or the validated license. And the reason why the government regulates the exports, it's for national security, foreign policy, commodities in short supply, and nuclear non-proliferation. So that's why the government is onto the exports. Next, we have antitrust laws, which can apply to IBE's foreign activities and to protect consumers and exporters. Last, we have the anti-boycott laws, which is U.S. Prohibits from participating or cooperating in any international boycott. It refuses to do business with any country with boycotting, who's boycotting, which is an example right now would be Israel. And if you do not follow any of these laws, there can be civil or criminal penalties. So these are the ways that we do business here in the U.S. and overall, everything is, we are all affected by it. As I was reading an article, the Venezuela oil is making a big change, and it's not only affecting Venezuela, but it's also affecting the whole world and how we do trade. So this is a little bit of in the international trade law, and I hope you have a good understanding. Thank you.